Hey, this is Rob. This is Folly Coffee Quick Hitter. Let's go. Hey, Folly Coffee Quick Hitter is a 5 to 7 minute answer to common coffee questions. We just opened up the Folly Coffee Tasting and Tour Room. We just finished up our second weekend, another successful weekend, telling and educating people all about the coffee roasting process. And one of the most common questions that we received in the tasting room was, how do I grind my coffee? How should I grind my coffee? Why should I grind my coffee in a very specific way? And so today's question I will be answering is, how does grind size affect the taste of the coffee, and how can I adjust it to manipulate those tastes favorably? So the first thing here is, if you're going to be choosing between two different grinders, the more standard ones that you see a lot of people have because they're very inexpensive are the blade grinders, the whirlybird, the grinders that just go and they have the blades that go around and they just chop up randomly. The reason these are not effective coffee grinders, now they get the job done, but they're not going to create the best cup of coffee. And Jeff put it in a really great way this weekend. When that blade is going around just randomly pulverizing the beans, you're going to get some like really fine dust. You're going to get some really coarse chunks. He said this would be like the equivalent of baking cookies, and instead of them all being uniform in size on the baking sheet, they're all different sizes. If the really small cookies would get burnt, the really big cookies would be overdone. You'd get a bunch of different flavors depending on the different size. And this is really comparable to coffee grinds. And this is why a burr grinder is so important, B-U-R-R. I know I've spoken about this before, but a burr grinder cuts the coffee to uniform size, and the best burr grinders are the ones where you can adjust the size of the grind. So the first step is to have a good grinder that's cutting it with a burr grinder to make sure that you're getting uniformity in the consistency of the grind. This is the most important first step. But then after this, people are like, I bought a burr grinder. My coffee still doesn't taste as good as I think it could. Or I got the grinder and now my coffee's coming out bitter, or my coffee's coming out sour. How do I adjust it? The general rule of thumb is, if your coffee is tasting too bitter, you are likely grinding it too fine. When you grind a coffee too fine, you are going to over-extract the compounds in the coffee. The hot water is going to spend too much time with those grounds, especially if you're doing like a drip coffee or a pour-over. When the grind is too fine, you can over-extract compounds and create bitterness in your cup. But if you go on the flip side and you go too coarse, you are going to under-extract flavors, and this is going to create sometimes sour or watery flavors. So if you're drinking your coffee and you're like, oh, this just like kind of tastes like sour, or just like really weak, or just really watery, and there's just not much flavor there, you will need to adjust the grind size down. So the general rule of thumb for different brewing methods are French press, you want to do a coarse grind. That's same for cold brew. Because French press is a full immersion method, immersion just means that the grounds stay immersed in the water. You want a coarse grind to make sure that you're not over-extracting those compounds as it stays immersed in the water. This is also true for cold brew, because cold brew is also an immersion method. For something like a pour-over or a Mr. Coffee, or like a drip coffee, or just other automatic brewers, you're going to want more of a medium fine grind. And these methods, it's a little easier to tell if your grind size is working, because if the brew takes really, really long, it's probably too finely ground. You want your typical pour-over to be about 2.5 to 3 minutes total. If it's taking way shorter and it's tasting sour or watery or weak, your grind is too coarse. If it's taking a really long time, or sometimes it'll even get completely stuck, your grind is too fine. I always recommend with every coffee to just manipulate grind size in a few different ways and just note how that affects the flavor. At this point in time, I kind of have like a grind setting that for every coffee that I get, I start at this setting and then manipulate from there. And that's what I recommend, is that you want to find kind of your middle ground that seems to work well with multiple coffees. And then if you have like a really bright coffee where you want to bring out more of that acidity, you can make it a little bit coarser, or potentially keep the grind size the same and just lower the ratio of coffee to water. But we're just talking grind size today. So if you're just manipulating that and you wanted to create a little bit more of that acidity, you could go a bit of a coarser ground. Or if it's not tasting sweet enough, you could try to go a little bit finer so you get a little bit more of that extraction of some of those sweeter compounds. So to recap, this Folly Coffee Quick Hitter, basically, the finer the ground, the more extraction you're going to get and the potential for more sweetness, but too finely ground and you're going to get bitter compounds. The coarser the grind goes, the more you're probably going to get some of those more like nice acidity, those delicate floral notes, but too coarse and you're going to get watery, sour flavors. I'm going to end it like that and say have a nice day.